Hello, welcome to the May webinar from Plain Family Resources. My name is Megan Witch and I am a clinical supervisor here. Today's presentation is going to be focused on shaping a strong generation, helping youth and adolescents build resiliency. So just to give you a little bit of information about me, check that out. There's my picture. So I joined EFR in about 2014, and you can see some of my credentials there. I currently supervise our internship program and intern team, as well as working primarily with our student assistance program. Pretty jazzed. These areas are definitely my forte. So I was very pleased and excited when Johanna asked me to put together a potential webinar for this month. And so you will hear a little bit more about that. I can tell you this webinar specifically is a compilation of some of the tools and tips that our interns have been working on with students, with families over the last school year specifically. So I know that everybody is in listen only. Please, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to add, we do have a chat box and we do have somebody who is monitoring that. We will have a more formalized question and answer at the end of the webinar, but by all means throughout the presentation, throw in your thoughts and questions and we will get to them. All right. So a little bit more about today. So our agenda, we're going to talk about words because words are important. We will go through a top 10. I have some time, to create and identify a personal commitment, and then like I said, we'll have some time for our Q&A. As I said, this presentation is a compilation of some work that our clinical team has been doing over the last year. As all of you likely know, being able to define resilience, practice tools and activities that help us to be resilient has definitely been challenged in the last year. And so hopefully this presentation will provide either a high five or some tips to try, and we'll just kind of take it as we go. So words are important. Resilience, as defined by psychologists, I am going to read this to you. So the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. As much as resilience involves bouncing back from these difficult experiences, it can also involve profound personal growth. So I want to pause here for just a quick minute, and I want this to sink in. Many of us, and if I could see you, maybe we could raise hands, but many of us may kind of pass over the idea of being resilient when we look at this specific definition. So many of us have probably experienced adversity in some capacity. Maybe we would consider trauma to be part of that, maybe not. Tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. The piece that I think from a clinical perspective we've kind of all learned in the last year is all of these experiences, they're unique to us, they're a little bit different, there's a slight shift here and there. We can all probably fall under this category, as resilience is one of those pieces that we need to continue to practice. We want to maybe become stronger in. So hopefully, like I said, at the end of this presentation or this webinar, we will have some of those tools and tips to be able to be resilient and kind of find that for ourselves as well as for the youth and adolescents that are in our world. Moving forward, I am going to go through, so our top 10, if you remember our agenda. These are in no particular order. However, I think that you will find that they link together pretty smoothly, which is pretty exciting. Okay, here we go. Practicing mindfulness. So mindfulness is a practice, I can tell you, in a lot of clinical services, many clinicians use, and the best way, the easiest way, the most simplistic way that I can describe mindfulness is being present in our moment and in our experience. So acknowledging what's happening, living in the moment, versus, as you can see from the picture here, is my mind full of all of these things, Or am I present and am I really pulling in what's in my environment? So down at the bottom, you can see practicing mindfulness permits choice and personal empowerment and promotes awareness and allows a gap between stimulus and response. When we practice mindfulness, we can be responsive versus being reactive to an experience. So if you've been in a situation where your kid says or does something and you have a very quick reaction, it's a snap reaction. It's not to say that that's bad. What we do want to take a look at, though, are we being mindful? Are we really present in this moment and responding to our kids in the most appropriate way? I'm not suggesting that we need to be perfect. I will promise you I am not perfect. What I am suggesting is the more that we practice truly being mindful and truly being aware, we are working to reduce our stress levels, our potential for anxiety, and our levels of worry. Kids are like sponges. They absorb what's in their environment. Sometimes it doesn't seem that way. I know it's, there's thoughts and questions out there where it's like, well, if kids are absorbing their environment, how come when they see me clean, they don't just start doing it? Different story there, although I wish they did. The piece about being mindful is, how am I responding? How am I responding to my person, to my child, to my adolescent, to whomever's in my space? And am I doing that purposefully? Okay. Setting healthy boundaries. We talk about boundaries just about in every conversation, if you really think about it. So we set boundaries in marriages, relationships, engagements at work. We set boundaries with our colleagues. We set boundaries with our family members. We also set boundaries with the people that are in our neighborhood and different communities. So the purpose around setting healthy boundaries, as you can see, is boundaries are basic guidelines for how we want to engage with our environment, with the people around us. Boundaries help other people to understand how we want to be interacted with. People are held accountable to those boundaries, and it's the expectation for how we want to be treated. If we're in an unhealthy relationship, it likely means that we don't have strong or healthy boundaries. When we are modeling for our youth and for our adolescents how to establish boundaries, how to maintain those boundaries, and then how to change those boundaries when it's appropriate, we are ultimately teaching them how to navigate through relationships with people, how to kind of absorb some of the difficult things that happen in relationships, while also really reflecting, and again, kind of going back to mindfulness and recognizing how do these pieces connect. If I'm mindful, then my boundaries are most likely appropriate. If my mind is full and chaotic, I may be setting boundaries out of reactivity or out of panic versus really out of need. Okay. A lot of us have learned to change our routine over the last year specifically, but creating a flexible routine, I can tell you, I've got some kids in my life that if they don't know exactly what to expect in that next 15 minutes to an hour, we're experiencing some chaos. So in some people's routine, there's not a lot of flexibility. However, I'm going to challenge us to create and to allow for some flexibility within our routines, to talk to our youth about, this is maybe what the routine needed to be when you were 4. However, now that you're 6 or 7, we want your routine to be a little bit different. As you can see on the slides, as kids grow, needs change. If we're still practicing the same routine that we started 2 years ago as adults, we might be missing out on something. We might not be really working at our optimal levels. So as we grow, as we develop, as life circumstances change, we also need, to a degree, our routine to change. So we want to be somewhat flexible while also creating a structure. Again, going back to mindfulness, if I'm aware of that, if I'm experiencing my environment for what it really is, I'm more likely to create that flexibility in a responsive and potentially even proactive manner versus reactivity and recognizing, oh my gosh, I've been doing the wrong thing, or I've been doing things that just really weren't helpful for me. Self-care. Self-care has probably been a phrase that maybe even makes you nauseous. If you think about every time you've heard self-care or work-life balance, they're great, they're important. Remember, one of our first slides was words are important. And while we focus on resilience there, self-care is important. Okay, so I want you guys to, I know I can't see you and you can't necessarily see me, but I want you to take a moment. I want you to close your eyes. And while you do that, I want you to reflect on, whether it's the last day, the last month, within the last year. And I want you to just kind of answer to yourself these questions. And if you'd like to send them in the chat, by all means, you're more than welcome to. But this is just more of a reflective activity. So I want you to take a moment. I'm actually going to pull out my watch here and I'm going to time. So for 1 minute, I want you just to reflect on, how do you engage in self-care? How do you replenish your energy? Maybe reflect on a location that you go to recharge, people that you're around, or not around. With this, there's no right or wrong. This is just being honest with ourselves about how we do this. Also think about, how often do you practice self-care? What's it like? How does it feel afterward? All right. Go ahead and open your eyes. And if you'd like to, by all means, please go ahead and enter into the chat any ideas or any thoughts or questions that you have about that activity, about the reflection, self-care, or anything that we've discussed up to this point. And we're going to continue through the rest of the webinar. Positive talk. This is one of my favorite things to talk to individuals about. So oftentimes I hear, positive self-talk doesn't work. I try to hype myself up and it's just not, it just doesn't do the trick. Positive talk, I want to be really clear with everybody, especially when it comes to talking to our kids. Positive talk is not, it's not creating that fantasy. It's not, saying, oh my gosh, you're the best, you're the superhero, you're fantastic, you never make a mistake, you never do anything wrong, like you are awesome, you're a champion. Those things may be true and maybe they're not. If we're being real with ourselves, I don't know about you, but I've got some kids in my life who, are not awesome all of the time. I love to be around them. I think they're awesome, but there are just pieces where, we can do things a little bit better. We can be healthier for ourselves. We can be more mindful. We can be more kind. And so positivity and positive talk in this capacity is about being real, and it's about being honest and looking at, what are my strengths? So again, it's not everybody deserves a trophy, everybody's a champion. We're all champions in our own way. I'm a firm believer of that. Like, we all rock it out in certain capacities. And then there's certain times, myself included, where it's like, ooh, I did not rock that out. However, I tried, I did it, I got through it. That's positive talk. So the image on your screen, you can't live a positive life with a negative mind. I don't know if truer words truly have ever been spoken. I wish I knew who made this. I don't know who made it, but it's true. So keep in mind, positivity and positive talk doesn't have to be a fantasy. It doesn't have to be pumping your kids up with, potential false hope. What it can be and what it needs to be, though, is real, honest, and true. We can look at the bright side of things without living in a fantasy world. Again, the more mindful that we are, the more likely we are to engage with other people who are healthy or who are working to improve themselves in some capacity, the more likely we are to be able to bring this into our daily routine. I practice positive self-talk every single day, several times a day. I don't think I have a big head. I'm just recognizing some of the things that I'm doing well at, and that feels good. That's part of self-care, if you think about the last slide. So positive talk, not a fantasy, not living in the clouds. It's being honest, it's being real, and it's being true, okay? We want to be able to demonstrate positive talk towards ourselves. We want to model that. We also want to reiterate positive talk with our youth. If you've ever heard a little kid talk down about themselves, it's heartbreaking. They hear it from someone, they learn it from somebody. We want to be the people who are teaching them something more uplifting, something more positive, something more forward moving. Control. Okay, so this is really design. Control is a word, and we talked about words matter. So the biggest piece about this is there are certain things in our lives that we can control. We can monitor, we can kind of organize, we can manage. And then there are things that we cannot control. And that stinks to think about, because I love to be in control. I really love to be in control. But there are pieces of this that I just can't. As you can see on the slide, I can't change the past. I can't control that. I can learn from it. So that's within my control. I can take an experience, I can learn from it. Part of this is linking to that positivity. It's also linking to being more mindful. So if you put all of these pieces together, right, whether you're a parent, you're an adult in a young person's life, you know of a young person, you're hoping to have a young person at some point in time, recognize there are pieces of this. Kids watch everything that adults do. They mimic after us, they learn from us, they teach us the things about ourselves that sometimes we don't like. But when we talk about what's in control, what I'm in control of, and what I'm not in control of, we are in essence teaching the youth and adolescents in our lives that we don't have to control everything and that it's going to be okay. Sometimes this is a really great reminder for ourselves. So while you can teach the youth in your lives that, not everything's in your control, let's kind of focus in these two areas, we have to be practicing that as well. Again, I don't know if, there's this phrase like, do as I say, not as I do. Let's not follow that at this point. Let's do, as adults, as parents, as educators, as whoever we are, as role models, let's recognize for ourselves what is within my control and what's not. There's a lot of there's a lot of behaviors that we have an opportunity to guide, that we have an opportunity to provide feedback on. And there's some things that we can't control. If you ever tried to convince your 4-year-old to wear something different than what they chose to dress on in the morning, I have, doesn't go well all the time. Sometimes I can convince if I can like fashionista my language enough. However, sometimes they want to do what they want to do. And in all honesty, is it worth an argument? Is it worth saying, no, you can't do that? Because keep in mind, we're trying to be mindful. We're trying to set healthy boundaries. If somebody, wants to wear pink versus blue or red versus white, are they exercising who they are and what their identity is? We want to be able to foster resilience. That's what this entire webinar is about. We want to foster resilience. We want to build that. We want to provide and teach the skills that kids need to be able to pick themselves up, because one thing that's outside of our control is the decisions that other people make, especially our kids. We have a great deal of influence at certain different stages in our kids' lives, but not forever. So again, going back to and being mindful of, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to control? Is it within my control, or is it something that I need to let go of? Do I have that healthy boundary within my relationships with my kids set to where they understand what my expectations are and I understand what their expectations and needs are? It's very important. Through that, we can create a flexible routine. We can change that routine if we need to. We can control pieces of that as we see fit, as we need to, demonstrating that self-care, being able to step away from an argument that doesn't need to be one, using that positive talk. Again, what's in my control? You can see at the very top, it says being kind, being accountable, trying again, doing my chores, asking for help. Things that are outside of my control that we can reiterate for other people, how other people treat me. However, if we focus back on that healthy boundaries, if somebody's not treating us well, we can encourage maybe that relationship isn't what it needs to be. Okay. Recognizing the control piece, especially helping younger kids or younger people to learn what's in control and what's not in control. I think is probably one of the most important top 10 that we're going to talk about today, in that letting go is part of resilience, at least from my perspective. All right, so with that, we also have this idea of a growth mindset, okay? So not everything's black and white. There's a lot of color. There's a lot of beautiful color in this world. And in order to see that color, we need to practice that resiliency, that kind of ebb and flow to a degree. So think about that routine. There's certain things that need to get done. Perfect. There's different pieces of there's different ways that we can get those pieces done. If we're focusing on a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, we're allowing ourselves to make progress, even if we don't accomplish everything 100% of the time. I'm not suggesting quit. I'm not suggesting failure. I'm simply, what I'm talking about here is, if I'm focusing on the progress that I'm making, the improvements that I'm making, the way that I'm feeling, that is more important than looking at just the finished product. Finished product is important. I'm not going to deny that. However, the process, the journey, that's just as important, maybe even more important. Okay. Practicing gratitude. So gratitude is something I think also, it's been floating around our world for quite some time now. I think there's been a strong emphasis within the last, 13 to 15 months or so. And so I was really trying to figure out gratitude means a little bit something different to everybody, and that's okay. So if you want to, by all means, throw in the chat, how do you practice gratitude? And I want you to just to kind of look at this slide and recognize there are some physical, emotional, mental, and social benefits to practicing gratitude. We actually have a physical change. There's potential that practicing gratitude actually helps lower our blood pressure and improve our sleep. I don't know about you guys, I love a good night's sleep. Like, it is my jam. I will take a good night's sleep over a lot of things pretty much any day. Okay, emotionally speaking, and if you don't have an adolescent, you probably soon will, or you may know some. If we can practice gratitude and ultimately reduce our envious feelings, or increase life satisfaction, or increase some optimism, that's pretty fantastic. If you've ever heard a middle schooler talk about all the things in the day that didn't go right, you can feel that. That's heavy. Versus practicing gratitude and recognizing and paying attention, not ignoring everything else, but really focusing and paying attention and being mindful and purposeful about the things that we do have, or the experiences that we do have, the positive feelings that we do have. It's incredibly powerful. Mentally speaking, increasing selflessness. Gratitude assists in decision making ultimately. So if we're thinking about from a physiological standpoint, if we're thinking about improving sleep, lowering blood pressure, that means that we have kind of more optimal blood flow. And when we have optimal blood flow to our brain, and especially our prefrontal cortex, we are more likely to be able to make clearer decisions, or at least have less stress when making decisions. So that's how that ties into things. Practicing gratitude also factors into resilience and thought patterns. So practicing all of these pieces together really helps us to create good, healthy, positive, uplifting, forward-moving thought patterns, practices, behavioral pieces. Socially, it also increases social support. You got to think, I know there's a statement that misery loves company. Not all misery loves company, and not everybody loves misery. So there's those pieces. The more that we are grateful and practicing that gratitude towards people and places and things in our lives, more likely we are to be able to open ourselves up to that in the future. Okay. Having difficult conversations. This is difficult in and of itself, right? So in a perfect world, when things are going well, it's still hard to make or to have difficult conversations. I can't tell you, I've spoken with countless family members, parents, adults, educators over the last year where they've repeatedly told me, I'm walking on eggshells, I'm afraid to talk about this, I think something's going on with my kid, I'm not quite sure. It is our responsibility. I'm going to tell you, clinically speaking, as well as personally speaking, it is imperative that we continue to have difficult conversations with our youth, even during difficult times. We can highlight strengths. We can highlight growth. We can highlight all of the positive things that are going on. We still need to be able to have the difficult conversations about those awkward topics, about whether we're talking about sex, or we're talking about hygiene, or we're talking about relationships, we're talking about grades, we're talking about behaviors. If we don't have these conversations, the expectation becomes that we don't have to have these conversations. And if you've ever had to have a difficult conversation with a kid, you know how important that they really are. Walking around on eggshells, tiptoeing around the issue, not wanting to rock the boat. I understand where we're coming from with that. I truly do. What I'm going to tell you though is, if we approach these conversations using the previous 8 tools that we've talked about, so mindfulness, growth mindset, gratitude, what's in our control, what's outside of our control, all of these pieces, if we approach these difficult conversations with positive intent and be able to highlight some of the strengths of our youth, they're not going to be as difficult as if we didn't. Not having a difficult conversation does not help people. I promise you that. And last but certainly not least, cut out the but. So there's a train of thought, there's a school of thought around dialectics. And the best way that I can describe this is, a lot of us will say, we have statements that go on in our heads. And they oftentimes can contradict other statements. So I might think, well, I can, be flexible, but that means I can't have boundaries. So you hear that but. So there's a negating property there. What I'm going to challenge you to do, and this is kind of a homework assignment for you. Don't worry, it's not graded. I'm not going to follow up with you unless you really want me to, and then you can throw it in the chat and we can figure that out. But there we go. And I want you to challenge yourselves to figure out, where can I eliminate the word but? Where can I take those two seemingly opposite ideas, opinions, what have you, and how do I combine them to recognize that both can be true at the same time? So here's a quick example. I can be resilient and I can struggle. Resilience does not mean that I don't struggle. And yet in our heads, sometimes we create a but. I can be resilient, but then I can't struggle. Both of these can be true. I can be resilient and I can struggle. Resilience is the process of moving through that struggle, right? This is what we're trying to teach our kids. We're trying to recommend, or we're trying to understand and teach them, not everything's going to be roses. Not everything's going to be sunshines and rainbows and unicorns, or superheroes and, awesome flashes. Life is difficult. How we've made it this far, I really don't know. We can use these skills, we can use these tools to help our youth develop resiliency. Some people are sometimes youth have more of an innate ability to be resilient. It just is. Luck of the draw, flip of a coin, however you want to look at it, it just is. It doesn't mean that those kiddos that we have that struggle to do this can't learn it. We can learn it through using these 10 techniques or tools or tips or tricks or however you want to look at it. So I want you to reflect on, are you practicing these pieces? And if you're not, I'm not going to be mad at you. It's not that you're not doing it right. We just want to check in. Is there an opportunity to add something to your routine? Is there a way to create that flexibility or revise that boundary or that expectation? Okay, which really takes us to this idea of developing a personal commitment. So each of you has your own understanding, your own experiences, your own world here. I see that we have currently 78 people logged on. So that means there's 78 different commitments that we could get. If you'd like to create a commitment about how you're going to use this or what you're going to be doing slightly differently or what you're going to continue to do, I'd love to see it in the chat. If you don't want to share, that's okay. I do encourage you to create a commitment and stick with it. Check in with yourself, practice that mindfulness, practice that purposeful communication, practice that idea of growth mindset, and see where it gets you. Because as you continue to practice these and become stronger and demonstrate resilience yourself, remember, kids are watching. Kids are going to ask questions. We can teach them through our modeling. So I ask you, what's your personal commitment? And again, if you'd like to share that in the chat, by all means, we'd love to hear them. If you don't, that's okay too. Give yourself an opportunity for that though. And with that, we are technically at our question and answer opportunity. Take a moment, reflect, think about the top 10 that we just went through. Identify any questions or prompts or thoughts that you'd like to share.
All right, Megan, I'm just going to jump in here because we've had a couple of questions that are the same. I just want to address it before I forget. Several people are asking for a copy of the slide deck. We don't provide a copy of the slide deck, but we do make the recording available on our website. So if you go to efr.org under our resources menu, there's a whole listing of webinars that we've shown from the past. So make sure to check those out. And this webinar will be up within the next 48 hours. And we have some people sharing, so I'm just gonna kind of read to everyone what I'm hearing. Going back to what are you doing for self-care? This was earlier in the presentation. We had someone say, I ride my motorcycle, best therapy is wind therapy. That's the motto many bikers use. And as to the last kind of question, what are you going to commit to, or my commitment is, someone said to plan ahead every week. Another person said, taking time each day to practice gratitude. I'm a big list reminder person, so I will be putting a reminder on my phone. Another person wants, is it possible to get a copy of your control circle image? We are raising our 12-year-old nephew and would love to share the graphic with him. Megan, do you know where you got that graphic?
That is a super good question. I don't off the top of my head, but I can. Johanna, do we have an opportunity to put like my email address in the chat at all?
Yeah, I can do that.
If whoever needs or would like that, by all means, just shoot me an email and I can find it again for you and send it to you. There's so many that are available. So even if you don't want to email me, that's totally fine. Using Google and looking at control versus in control or out of control. There's so many visuals. It's nutso in a good way.
We do have a question, Megan, from someone. Do you have a suggestion on how to get a child that is doing something for attention to understand the behavior and getting them to realize that they do not need to continue the behavior to get a parent's attention?
Great question. Do we know how old that youth is? Reason why I ask it, if you're still on the
5 years old.
5 years old. Okay. So with a 5-year-old, that's a tough one, right? Because ultimately what they know developmentally is they just know they're not getting the attention. They might not necessarily know why. They might not necessarily know who am I trying to get the attention from? Why is that happening? They might not be able to articulate that. So what I would suggest, adults oftentimes have a tendency to try to verbally explain things to kids. I do the same thing with my family as well. Instead, I would encourage you to kind of adopt this idea of time in, meaning spending more dedicated time with that little one. And so maybe it's both parents spending time with that little one, maybe it's sharing some of that responsibility, but doing something that's dedicated and helping them. You can ask kind of some general questions during that time. what kinds of things do you like to do with mom or dad or grandma, grandpa, or whomever, whatever your role is specifically with them. 5-year-olds at that stage, they don't necessarily understand the words and the why and the how. Their brains just haven't been able to develop to the point where that logical piece makes sense. So this is much more of an emotional connection that they're trying to make, an attachment that they're trying to make. They may not be able to articulate or understand your words then as to, buddy, you don't need to do that anymore. Like, we're here. So reinforcing that though through attention that's positive. Keep in mind, whether maybe it's that growth mindset or having some of that positive talk, maybe practicing some of these self-care activities, maybe figuring out what that 5-year-old self-care activities kind of look like. That sounds a little goofy, but being able to practice some of these things specifically with them without necessarily using the words to explain yourself might be effective. Kids are playing, so we need to play with them. That's their language.
Thanks, Megan. Another person wrote in, my 15-year-old son has always been a glass half full type kid. How would you suggest developing a positive growth mindset in him? I feel like I'm a positive person. I wonder if maybe he's a glass half empty type kid.
Sure. Help him to identify whether it's strengths, things that are going well. I have some kids that I've worked with in the past who definitely are a little bit more glass half empty. And so looking at what are some things that you've tried and succeeded at. It doesn't matter if it's like learning how to blow a bubble with your bubble gum. I start small. I start small with adults too. So, sometimes people are like, oh, Megan, that's for little kids. Doesn't matter, because maybe we didn't learn it as a little kid, and that's okay. Again, we're really just looking at what are some of the good things. Maybe my positive for the day is being able to go outside. School's coming to an end for a lot of students here in the next few weeks. What are some things that we can look forward to? What are some things that he feels comfortable with, that he feels confident in? Maybe he plays games. So, does he have a signature move? Is he good at making friends? Is he good at maintaining friendships? So it doesn't matter necessarily how small of the win that it is, because we as adults know it's the small stuff that really matters, right? Like, yeah, those grand gestures are fantastic. It's really those small pieces that lead up to and help us feel more confident. So helping him kind of identify, start small, and he'll learn the process of getting big. He's practiced most likely thinking about what he doesn't have. So maybe even trying to practice some of that gratitude and the growth mindset might be helpful.
All right, thank you, Megan. Another participant says, any tips for having those hard conversations? My daughter is 7 years old and shows a lot of anxiety when they practice intruder drills at school. I tried to make her feel better, but never had to deal with this myself when I was younger.
Sure. So I think tips just around having difficult conversations, be real with her. You can tell her that, I didn't have to do this. I don't know. Let's kind of work through it together. Difficult conversations when she's experiencing, and this goes for anybody, but so when the person who's being talked to or talked with, when they're experiencing strong emotions, let people know that emotions are okay. That, we have a tendency sometimes, especially around kids, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. Just forget about it. We have a tendency to try to dismiss some of these pieces. And instead, I'm just going to encourage you to let's talk about it. Let's talk about what's uncomfortable. Let's talk about what makes it so difficult. And know that as a parent or as a person in that little girl's life, you can be with them. Spending time with them, hearing them process through that reinforces for her that you're there, that you're a safe person, that you're kind of a safety net.
Thank you. Our next one is, how do you get college-age kids off the phone and communicating as adults?
Oh man, isn't that the question of the I've had so many people ask this. It's a great question, and I think what it takes is we need to be mindful and we need to be aware of what their expectations are. So if they're on the phone, what are they on the phone for? Is it appropriate? And we just wish that they were communicating more in person. Some of those pieces are worth a reflection for whoever asked this question. What I would suggest is set the boundary. Set the boundary in your relationship, whatever that is, with that college student about, hey, I want to have some technology free time with you. So it's an expectation we figure out a way to do that. I don't care if it's 15 minutes or if it's 5 hours, but I think setting that boundary and then being able to communicate that to them, you might still get eye rolls, but keep in mind that's outside of your control how they respond. You are responsible for setting the boundary for yourself.
All right, and then someone is asking, do you have any favorite resources for introducing practicing gratitude as a family?
Oh man, you know, that's a great question. I have some resources around gratitude. In all honesty, this is very real and honest. I like different books. So there's a series. It's a children's book series that I have shared with people in the past. And of course, as soon as I say that, I am losing the name of them. But it's a children's book series. You can probably find it at Target, Walmart, Amazon for sure. If you search for mindfulness children's books, you'll see them. One is I Am Kind, I Am Mindful. There's kind of cartoon-like pictures on the front, and really any children's book, in all honesty, even if you don't have young children, I think are great introductions to the art of practicing gratitude. Even in my research and kind of pulling different resources for this webinar, gratitude really means a lot for a lot of different things to different people. And so if you can first maybe identify what does gratitude and what does that practice maybe mean to you, and maybe what does it sound like or look like, that might give you a good direction. I'm more than happy to search for.
It looks like there are they the I Am Peace, I Am Love, I Am
Yes.
Human. It looks like they're by Susan Verde. I'm just typing this here. Is the author, and maybe Peter Reynolds is artist. But
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I entered the information. They look really cool.
Oh, they're awesome. They are awesome. And it's like, is there anything mind-blowing about this? In all honesty, you guys, no. However, that's kind of the beauty of these things, is that sometimes we just get to a point where we're out of ideas. We feel like we've tried everything, and this kind of, it just reframes things for us. So they're simple, they're easy to understand. That's why I love kids' books. And I share kids' books with my adults all of the time.
That was all of the questions and comments, Megan. That was such a great Q&A. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time with us today.
For sure.
I will share a little bit about the resources available through Employee and Family Resources. So if you're listening today and you know that you have an EAP benefit through EFR, just remember that we have 24-hour access to our phones where you can speak with a licensed clinician about what's going on. We can be reached at 800-327-4692. We also have a website, www.efr.org, which has a lot of great resources. When you go to the website, at the top, there will be a menu called Resources, and that is where you can find recordings of webinars we've done in the past, including this one will be up shortly. Upcoming webinars to sign up for. We have a podcast, we have assessments, we have so many great tools on our website, so I encourage you to check that out. But if you do have our EAP benefit, this slide just shows you at a glance what you have access to. In-person or virtual counseling sessions, telephonic, financial and legal consultation, elder and child care resources, identity theft resolution, life coaching. And we say life happens, we're here to help. So really whatever is going on in your life, there's a really, really great chance that your EAP benefit through EFR can help you with that. So, and we had someone just comment that she's very thankful for her EAP benefit. And I do want to emphasize that EAPs are often forgotten about. It's the benefit that you're not having to pay for. You don't have to enroll during open enrollment. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind in many cases. So please explore the benefits. They're available to you and anyone in your household. And we are, again, here to help with whatever's happening in your life. Big thanks to Megan. We appreciate all of the work you do for us at EFR. And again, thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us today.
Well, thank you.